are superheroes, let me see you take off. I pray you never take your cape off. Even though more time we don't flash straight. But trust me bro, I promise we gon' die great. Our heavy but we ain't lightweights. Our parents were legends, they had to migrate. So that's the reason not to sit around and chat.
For this episode, how's it going, Art?
It's going really good, Deena. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. So to start today's episode, I want you to give my audience a brief introduction to who you are and what your current role is.
Yeah, so I'm Art Butler. I've been working in IT for 20 some odd years. My current role is a product manager for a technical compute platform, our container platform, I should say, like OpenShift, Kubernetes, if you're familiar with that. But yeah, I'm the product manager for making sure that's available, delivered, and meeting the needs of all of our consumers.
So I'm going to go out on a limb because I don't really know what you do. And I want you to break it down for someone like me who just has like no clue what any of that means. Give me like the basic understanding of what you do. Yeah,
so for the company that I work for, we have computer programs that serve the needs of our consumers internally to our company and our customers externally. So if you went to a website for a company, that website is running on some compute somewhere. And so we want to be one of the, best at delivering, websites. Let's start all over, Deena.
Okay, you're fine.
Okay, cool. Let me see how I can word this in such a way that's not so complicated. All right, so I'm ready when you are.
Yep, just go ahead and just start over.
Okay. Okay, all right. So essentially what I do, I'm a product manager for our compute platform within my company. And that compute platform is where we run our computer programs that serve the needs of our company and our customers. So we would like to update those programs to meet the needs of the business. And that could be, different promotions or different things that we do to add value to the company that through our digital platforms. They all run on my platform. We want to make those updates as quickly and as easy as possible. And so the platform that I am product manager for is a best of breed. And it's what we call container-based computing today. And it's kind of like the new edge of computing. Maybe start all over again. Sorry. I just realized I was using it 1,000 times. I hate that.
I can edit that out so you don't have to worry about that.
Oh, can you? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry, Deena.
No, you're fine.
Right. Okay. Yes. Okay. So, all right, here we go. So I'm product manager for a major credit card company. And I'm a technical product manager for a compute platform that we use to deliver the computing applications like websites, and whether it's your mobile applications that our customers use to access the services that we provide. So all of that runs on my platform. I'm responsible for that platform to deliver those applications to serve our customers.
And Art, what I've been learning lately is that product manager means different things at different companies. So I do want to just take a moment and highlight for you, since you're a technical product manager, what are some of your day-to-day activities or responsibilities that you do?
So from a day-to-day basis, I'm always, keeping my ear to the ground and meeting with my consumers of my platform. So they'll have specific requirements to meet, to meet the business requirements to meet business requirements. So I need to know what those requirements are and build a roadmap and let them know when and if I'm going to deliver those capabilities to meet their requirements. That's one of the first and foremost things that I'm doing. The other thing is just to make sure that the platform and the services that I deliver to meet the needs of my consumers is available. So it's basically two-pronged. Making sure what I have out there right now is working and they can utilize it and it's always up and running. And the availability is there, and then actually meeting the future needs of my consumers. So I'm always getting those requirements and making sure that I'm presenting a roadmap. And if I can't meet the requirements, then I have to go to see if I can get the money for it, see if I can get it prioritized with upper management and explain to them why this is adding value for our company to see if we can get that on the roadmap.
So it sounds like you're dealing with two sides of the spectrum. You're dealing with the consumer side, which they obviously have a lot of demands. If we even just think about how we use the internet, how many demands we have for certain apps and certain websites that we wish they had different functionality. But also on the flip side, you have to talk to like C-suite and executives to actually get their buy-in to see the value of some of the features that you're trying to get onto your platform or onto the system that you're working on. So how do you balance that? Because it's a little bit of context switching, in my opinion.
And that's a great point, Deena. It's actually very challenging to balance. It is a requirement of the job as a product manager, but it does take time management to balance that, because as far as meeting the current needs, sometimes you're going through some technical challenges to do that, and it takes away from being able to meet with your consumers. And so one of the things you do is you just kind of like stay transparent. So when I can't necessarily give the focus to, let's say, the future roadmaps, the future capabilities, the focus that they need, I'm being very transparent about why I can't do that. And then also I enlist help. So, I can go to upper management and just make sure that they understand in certain forums what's coming. And then I kind of like, let them have that decision and just try to give them all the data points that they need to be able to make a good decision. And just kind of let them know, be transparent about where I'm at in the process.
Okay. And that's interesting. And I guess one other question that comes to mind with your whole process is, once you get a roadmap going, once you get agreement that, hey, this is what we want to add from a feature standpoint, you have to actually work with the team to build that out, right?
That is correct. That is correct. And we in generally, most companies that I've been working with in the last, 10 to 15, but I would say like 10 to 12 years, we follow, agile methodology, and we're constantly building a backlog with those features that are coming in our roadmap. And, to get that backlog to where we want it and groomed and ready to execute on, there's a lot of work, but we follow agile methodology where I have my architects, my lead engineers, they're, having the conversations that's necessary to at least get those features started, get them to a point where we can start on them. And once we get to that point, you can kind of understand whether you're going to actually, when you can deliver on those. And then you can change your roadmap accordingly. It's really a prioritization discussion because you have limited resources. So you can put things in your roadmap generally tentatively. And then you come up with those tentative dates a lot of times based on the customer's expectations. But ultimately, once you get to the point where you're really having those deep conversations with your engineers and architects on what it's going to take to deliver those features, you can get closer to a real date, and you just stay transparent in that process the whole time, because the business is going to have to make certain decisions on when you truly can deliver or if you can't.
You bring up a really good, it seems good in theory, but I'm going to throw a monkey wrench into what you've mentioned. And I'm sure this has happened to you many times. There's a lot of times where consumers or individuals come and say, well, this needs to be a priority. I need you to do this now. How do you handle that, especially if you already have a roadmap created? And as you mentioned, you have things in the backlog that you need to address.
That's a great question, because that happens way too often. And so one of the things that I've had to learn over the years is how to be good at saying no. Sometimes you just have to say no. And then if they won't take no for an answer, that's when you have to kind of like run it up the chain to have a prioritization conversation, because again, you only have so many resources. And, if it really is that valuable, especially to the enterprise, then those who are making those decisions at the C-suite and at the senior VP level, they can have that prioritization discussion. And then if they do deem it as a priority, then I can make some changes in my roadmap to say, hey, some of these things that I was going to deliver are going to get deprioritized for this new effort that came. But until then, most of the time what I do is I essentially say no until we can at least have some of those conversations. Mm-hmm. And then if they don't take no for an answer, I just kind of have to run it up in that fashion.
So in this instance, it sounds like when you say no, no is a complete sentence. Am I right?
No is a complete sentence. Wait, let me just be a little bit clear. Sometimes it's no or no, not right now. Meaning like I may be able to do it, but it's nowhere near in the time frame that they need it from a business perspective. So it's all to them is no, even if it's not right now, so they might need it on such and a specific date to meet a certain business objective. And in those cases, if I can't deliver it, even though it's not right now, it's to them, it's a no, it's a hard no, complete sentence.
Yeah. I've definitely seen that experience, especially on the consulting side, where we're on a project and someone wants, a feature done right away, and how you have to go up the chain, how no is not the answer that they want to hear. So I've definitely been in the position to see how a product manager has to deal with those situations.
Absolutely.
And for those who are interested in the product manager role, want to know from you, what skill set do you think, or skills do you think someone has to have in order to be successful as a product manager?
I think really you have to be able to really converse with your consumers. And today is really technical product management. So I would honestly say you also have to kind of be somewhat of a SME not a super detailed low-level SME, but at least have a strong understanding technically of the products that you're delivering, what those products do for your consumers, why your consumers are using those products. And then the other part is just really just having strong communication skills, empathy to understand, to kind of put yourself in the shoes of your consumers or your customers. I think that's a big one. So communication, always being transparent. And then at the other one is really interpreting, being able to interpret what the business needs are into technical needs. I think that's and give that conversation both ways, because your engineers and your architects, they need to not only understand just technical details, but they have to understand the why, and you kind of need to translate that to them so that they can be as innovative as possible in their delivery. And then the other way is just essentially having that empathy and communicating with your consumers on the other end.
What I find so interesting that you keep mentioning is it's a technical product manager role. And I know that a lot of times, especially in the last couple of years, usually when people are looking for roles, yes, it's product management and it's within tech, but a lot of people, from my perspective, don't have that technical piece. So I want to know from you, what is kind of the difference between the technical product manager versus just product management? And I know you've mentioned it a little bit when you said that when you're creating these features or, want to create for your product or platform, you need that technical expertise behind the scenes to come up with the best solution. But is there anything else that you see as a difference?
So yeah, from a pure product management role versus a technical product manager, I think there's a couple of things. I think the major difference is, I think exactly what you just said, is essentially being able to, on the technical side, being able to translate those requirements to your engineers and architects to to deliver those features in the best way. I think having that broad-based, medium-level technical expertise, because technology touches so many different pieces today. It's no longer a very isolated, domain. You have to be kind of have a strong understanding across the technology domain, especially in computing, meaning it could be, application development, it could be platforms, compute platforms, it could be web-based services, APIs, et cetera. Just having a good understanding and networking, having a good understanding of all of those, maybe not necessarily a SME, but maybe a SME in a few of those areas to be able to kind of really deliver to your architects and engineers to, deliver those features. Now, on a pure product management side, one of the things that you have to get into is kind of like, market analysis and things like that. You don't really find that as much on the technical product management side. You do find it somewhat if you're directly customer facing. But that's one of the things that I think differentiates between a pure product management role that's not as technical. It's really, you're getting into market segmentations, market analysis, and a lot of, interviewing your customers. Well, you actually might do that on the technical side too, just getting customer feedback and data. That's a very important part of both, whether it's technical or not technical. So, but it's really, I think the market segmentation and market analysis is kind of where they kind of diverge a little bit. they still overlap, but they diverge somewhat.
Oh yeah, definitely they overlap. That's for sure. But I do feel like if you're doing technical product management, in a way, you're using two different parts of your brain, because the technical side is like all these, usually people who are on the technical side like to get into the nitty gritty details. Y'all can't help it. I'm not fully a technical person, but I've seen it time and time again. Technical people love to get into the details. Whereas for product management, you're using a different side of your brain because it's more of the soft skills of like organization, talking to your consumer, your client. And so for you, has it been hard to keep that balance of product management versus the technical side?
Absolutely. you absolutely. I think one of the things about being technical, you're just always curious.
Mm-hmm.
So I have my product. I have my product architects. I have my engineer, and I'm in there. I try to be as close to the ground as I possibly can, to just kind of get a beat of how the teams are delivering and where they may be having challenges and where we might need to pivot. Because part of my job is to build a really good team and keep a strong team. So when you see some of the things that they're playing with, you kind of want to dabble too. One of the things that has helped me with that is that a lot of times my access to some of these things have been taken away from me. And so for a long time, I was a technical product manager in the continuous delivery space, especially around, building applications and delivering those applications onto compute platforms. So that's kind of like my background for a lot of years. This whole container thing that I'm doing, I did that as a challenge because I am not a SME in that area. And that has helped, actually. So the curiosity is there. So I want to play around, but it's too dangerous for me to play around on our system, to be honest with you. So it's allowed me to kind of like step away from the nitty gritty details and having my hands on the keyboard, because I've went into a space where I did not, kind of like grow up in that domain. And so that's really helped me. And so I think time is the other part. I only have so much time anyway. So even as curious as I want to be, I have to spend a certain amount of time, a significant amount of time, dealing with my customers, communicating with my customers. So that's the other piece of it. So I've kind of learned over time to kind of hone in that curiosity and, taking this new role on a container platform that I'm not a SME in, has kind of helped with that. And that was the purpose of actually doing it.
You know what? There's two things I want to go back and touch on. First is that you mentioned being close to the ground when you're working with the team. Now, I've seen the positive and negative sides of that. So I want to ask, from your perspective, does that ever affect your relationships? And let me elaborate on that a little bit. Sometimes when you're close to the ground, you step on people's toes, because sometimes people feel like that's a little bit micromanagement, or, you're stepping into their space or domain. But I've also have seen instances with being close to the ground can help with coming up with new creative solutions to problems, because you bring up a different viewpoint that others haven't thought of. So I want to get your perspective if you've had that effect in your role.
I have, when I first started out on this track from product owner to product manager, being close to the ground, sometimes I probably gave too much, guidance, I should say. Not so much micromanage, but I didn't let my team come up with their own ways on how to do something. Mm-hmm. So it took some years, and I learned how to back away from that. So now when I'm saying close to the ground, it's really, it's just more of an ear to the ground. So a lot of times I'll attend meetings without even giving much feedback. If I see something that they need help in, I let them try and figure it out themselves first. Mm-hmm. And I kind of let the product architects and product engineers, I rely on them to just kind of like the team building to kind of figure out their own way, because I don't want to get in the way to innovation. Two, my thought process is not necessarily the best. And then on top of that, I think where I do interject in is just on the why. I really try to push the why when I have my ear to the ground, and let them understand why we're doing something. And I think that kind of like drives innovation a little bit better. And then it also gives them a sense of purpose, because we work on a lot of technology, bits and bytes here and there, and it can become a little mundane. But you really have to have an understanding of why you're doing something, and what the impact is going to be to our consumers, I think that helps them feel like a sense of purpose for the work that they're doing. So I hope that answered your question. It is a balancing act, but I really try to just understand, what's going on, where they may need help, making sure they understand why we're doing something, and not really interjecting too much. I kind of stay out of the way.
Yes, that definitely answers my question. And I do definitely have to go back and highlight where you mentioned having someone feel like they have a purpose. I think that's what's missing from a lot of people's careers and their jobs, is because there's so much either micromanagement or stepping on each other's toes. They don't feel like they really have a purpose in their role. So I really appreciate that you mentioned that that's kind of the attitude that you lead with, being that you're a product manager on the team.
Hey, thanks, Deena.
And another thing that I want to go back and mention is, you mentioned for you like to build a good team. People say that all the time. So I need to know from you, what does that mean exactly? Like, define for me what a good team is to you?
Well, a good team to me is, first, one that actually, where the engineers and product architects, myself, product owners, they actually get along. I believe the right attitudes and being able to work with people. Like, everything is about collaboration. When we're talking about building, you're not doing this in isolation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's really people that can really get along and work well together. I think that's first and foremost. I think the other piece is, I think a good team is where everyone has each other's back. There are, instances where things come up, they're unexpected. Our platforms are very critical to the systems that our customers are using. And everyone is willing to go above and beyond to make sure that availability is there. So you don't really have the same people, getting, like going above and beyond. It's basically the whole team. No slackers, I guess. Everyone's willing to kind of like have each other's back. I think that's part of it. And then the other piece is, I really like engineers that are curious, not just engineers that will come in and, hey, step 1, step 2, step 3, they have the ability to be curious and figure out things, and they think outside of the box. I think those 3 pieces are really what I personally look for in a good team. First and foremost, I don't care how smart you are, you have to be able to get along with other people and collaborate. And then, have each other's back. Basically, I don't want a certain amount of people carrying out most of the load. And then third is the curiosity and just being willing to figure out things on your own. And at the same time, ask for help when you need it.
Yeah, I would agree. Those would be characteristics I look for from a good team as well. And actually, before we switch to the next topic, last question I have around being a technical product manager is, how can you get that role? Is this a role you see people who are coming out of college getting immediately? Is this a role that you see need some experience? If someone's listening to the podcast and wants to be a technical product manager, what do they need to do to get that role?
Yeah, so it's a couple of ways. So I kind of got it organically. Just starting to step away from the keyboard. Essentially, if you've been a team lead in technology, like a lead engineer, and then you kind of want to like really start making more about decisions on the features that you're going to deliver in conjunction with kind of like being in a lot of conversations with the business. And you'll see lead engineers and architects get pulled in by product owners and product managers into those conversations. And you'll kind of start to realize that you have the ability to be in front of the customer or in front of the consumer and be able to translate some of the requirements or requests that they have into delivering technology. And I think that comes natural for some people, others it doesn't. But what I've seen is that some people will actually go get a product owner certification, or at least become a product owner. And that's really where you're really starting to actually move closer to product management. The product owner is really running the Scrum team and is responsible for making sure that technology is fully available and delivering on that technology. And then but they don't necessarily, they're not as much in front of the the consumer as far as building a roadmap, making sure you have the budget for doing certain things, and making sure things are prioritized at an enterprise level. Their prioritization is really inside the backlog of the team. And so the next step to graduating from a product owner is really going to the product management level. And that's essentially doing a lot of what a product owner does, but you're just really more customer focused. And you have those budget conversations, you have those upper level prioritization conversations. And you can also get like a certification in product management. I got my Scrum Master certification. I became a product owner and was always an engineer consulting, so out in front of customers also. So I kind of like built it organically and fell into the product management role. But those are some of the ways that you can do it. And you can also get a product management certification also.
And Art, I know you mentioned quite a few certifications, which I appreciate. Can you also mention which organizations to get those certifications from?
Yeah, you can do it through scrum.org and Scrum Alliance. Both of those provide product management, product owner, and Scrum Master certifications, pretty much any certification within the Agile, like Scaled Agile framework.
Awesome. And also, I just want to throw out two that I've done that a lot of people don't talk about, and Art, maybe you even want to look into. They're more like leadership certifications. So like Cal E, and that's more related to employees, and Cal O, which is organizations, two leadership certifications, but it helps you think outside the box when it comes to leadership. It gives you just a whole different perspective from a holistic view that a lot of people don't even know about these certifications. So I want to throw that out there too.
Hey, thanks, Deena. That's why I like talking to you. You always put me on to something.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, besides talking regular mess.
Right. Yeah.
Now, Art, I know you don't think the conversation ends here because you've had a whole other half of life in the tech industry. And so previously, you also were a DevOps architect, correct?
That is correct.
And so DevOps is one of the hottest buzzwords in tech right now. And I understand it's much more than a buzzword, but I want to give people the actual real experience of being a DevOps architect. So I want you to start off by describing that role to my listeners. What does a DevOps architect actually do?
So DevOps architect, it's interesting. First of all, the word DevOps is fully loaded still to this day. Depending on who you ask, you'll get probably a different answer from everyone. But what it means to me is, I started off working for a small company. Well, actually, I started off working for a very large company and moved to a small company where I was a consultant in the space of building applications and deploying those applications, and automating the building of them and automating the deployment of those applications on the compute systems. And we were doing that before the word DevOps really kind of came out. It was basically the automation on building, testing, and delivering your applications. And so working for a small company, one of the things that you end up doing is you wear a lot of different hats. So if I just want to test something and I need a particular database, I need a particular web server, I need a front end server, and I need a back end server, I would build all that myself. So all of that's just operations for me to actually build an application and deliver it. So what you've seen over the years is that there's silos set up for each one of those. So your database, you have a database team, you have your application development team, maybe front end application, then you have your middleware teams, and you have all these silos. And so when you get into large enterprises, what happens is you have to put in a request to have anything done with each one of those silos just to deliver something end to end. And DevOps is essentially stringing all those together, taking out the middleman, and being able to deliver from beginning to end in an automated fashion. And so I kind of got into it naturally, working for that small company, and just automating things so that we didn't have to have those requests between silos. And that's basically how I got into DevOps and became a DevOps architect. And today, that's gotten even more, I would say it's become more complicated, but at the same time, more exciting, because the cloud environments have come in the last 10 years. And a lot of companies are moving to the cloud, and your endpoints of compute is in the cloud. And that's giving us, some other features that we can utilize to make it easier to do DevOps.
And you mentioned that DevOps is a loaded term. Why do you say that? I mean, you've explained what DevOps really means, but why do you feel like it's a loaded term? Is it a little bit easier than we're making it out to be, or are people just, I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. So if you go to like continuous delivery forums and any of these different DevOps, conferences, it depends on who you talk to will determine how that's answered. I actually think it is pretty simple. It's you put the development and the operations into the same group of people. It's very hard to do that in an enterprise because you got compliance and stuff like that. So I think when it comes to the practicality of it and trying to implement DevOps is what changes the term based on where you're trying to, implement DevOps at. So if you're in a small company where that's not like a banking industry or a medical or in the medical field where you don't have HIPAA and, FDIC type stuff, regulations to deal with, DevOps might be exactly the way I explained it in the purest sense. But when you try to actually apply it in major corporations that do have these constraints, they may actually approach it slightly different.
And you know what, you've kind of already mentioned the process for DevOps, but let's kind of break it down a little bit further and go like step by step for people they've heard the term, but they really don't know what it means. Let's do an overview of like, what is the different phases in DevOps and the different processes that are within DevOps.
Okay. Yeah. So let's take an application development team. They're building, let's say a JavaScript based website. It has like a node based backend server component, and it also reaches out to other peripherals, like let's just say a database. So essentially, if I'm a development team, I don't want to have to go to some database team to get my database. I don't want to go to a like a middleware or a server-based team to handle my node server, and I don't want to have to be separate from my my UX developers on the front end using JavaScript. I can essentially put them all in one room, potentially all in one room, or define a single process where I can actually spin up my database. I can just request it automatically. I can build my application to utilize that database automatically. And I can also spin up a component so that I can run my server side, my node server side component. And then I can also spin up another, let's say just machine. It could be virtual container based to actually build and develop my front end. So I'm doing that all within a single team or even a single person. And we put together a process, generally these days we call them pipelines, to actually build those and then to actually run my applications on them. So once I'm running my application, you're still going through the software development lifecycle that's been around for years, right? So you're developing and then you go through some middle stages of testing, and then you eventually deploy that to production. So the DevOps piece is actually provisioning my components, building on those components, and testing in an automated fashion. So I don't want to have to test anything manually. I'm building my tests as part of building my software. And so I'm testing against my database. I'm testing my application against other, maybe other applications I need to talk to. And I'm testing the server side and front end components. And so I take that through my life cycle, and then when I'm ready, I can automatically deploy to production. And if that's a rigid process, you can do that, maybe multiple times a day. There are companies that actually deploy to production the same software multiple times a day. So that's kind of what that process is from beginning to end. Depending on what type of organization you're in, you can do it seamlessly. There might be, but the goal is to do it from beginning to end completely automated.
Now, from an automation standpoint and with the DevOps process, what are some of the tools and platforms that you're seeing being used to have a successful DevOps flow?
Yeah, so there's some traditional tools. I would say like things like Jenkins, GitHub for version control, Jenkins for orchestration. Travis CI would be another one that's broadly used for orchestration. There's a new one coming out. GitHub is having their own orchestration that's coming out, and that's GitHub Actions. It's out already. But when I mentioned orchestration, that's the piece that runs the pipelines and allows you to, link together all those different silos that I was talking about, whether you're spinning up a database or other components for your applications. And then I think the other thing is virtualization, actually really containerization. So we used to do virtualization where you can just spin up a virtual machine, but now those are heavyweight. So if I want to spin something up extremely fast, everything's moved to containers. And a lot of times that's done in the cloud. And the number one container orchestrator today that almost everyone is using is called Kubernetes. And so when you link all those components together, like Jenkins, GitHub, there's also another component that we use to house the actual deployment artifacts that you'll deploy, which is essentially your application. It can be in the form of images or in like a jar war file. Those would be things like Nexus, Artifactory would contain things like that. So those are essentially the major components. And then there's a bunch of testing tools in between. Some of the mobile developers that have certain types of testing tools that can emulate let's say a mobile device. Can't think of some of the names of them right offhand, but then you have testing tools like Cucumber and Gherkin frameworks to automate some of your testing. And there's a myriad of other ones too.
And so we've talked through what the current process would be like from a DevOps perspective, but to give some context and some color to where we've come from, can we talk about what the process used to be in the past and how it was manual?
Oh my goodness. Yes. Oh, it seems like ages ago in some ways. I haven't thought about it in so long because we're so far removed from it in a lot of ways. But essentially what would happen in the past, let's say I'm building an application, I'll build it on my desktop. And essentially what I would do is I would take that executable or whatever that artifact that I built, and I might put it on a shared drive for some QA team to go install it on some server and run it. That might take them 2 or 3 days. We're going way back, maybe like a day, but way back, you're looking like 2 or 3 days. And then a lot of the tests weren't automated. So you had a thing called user acceptance testing, where you would literally, if you're running, let's say a website, you would have a user go in and click into certain fields, and you would actually test to make sure, the response is the way you want it to be, what your expectations were. After that, if you had some problems, it went back to you as a developer on your computer, and you build it again, throw it over the wall to the QA system till you got it right. And then at that point, someone deployed it onto some production server, a whole nother team. And, that might be a whole ceremony in itself, where you had like a production support team that would do that late at night, when a lot of consumers aren't using the product, and it would a lot of times require downtime. And I think that was one of the things I did not mention previously, is that a lot of this automation we do, if you do it in a certain way, it doesn't require downtime in most cases. But in the old days, it would require stopping your application and flipping to a new version of it. Thinking about those days, it seems so far away.
Yeah, it just sounds like we've definitely taken a step in the right direction. I'll put it that way.
Right.
And it eliminates a lot of the red tape that people used to have to experience of like actually getting something to actually getting your application to be usable by other people. It just seems like, at least from my perspective, it just seems like it would always take forever. There were always this red tape that you had to hop over. So DevOps has definitely changed the game for many.
It has. You're absolutely right, Deena.
And from the perspective of being a DevOps architect, I want you to tell my listeners, what are some skills that you think, if someone's looking to get into that particular role, what skills do they need to be successful?
Yeah, so DevOps architect, I think one of the things is having a background, somewhat of a background, not in application development, And one of the things I'm just noticing nowadays is that people are their skills are very wide, at least to a medium to a low level. So I would say have a significant experience in application development so that you kind of understand what the consumer is looking for, at least application developers, because that's who DevOps is really serving. It's serving the application development community. And the underlying pieces that they need, having, some background in like Linux and understanding, what it takes to run on a Linux system, and then the virtualization piece, whether it's what we call infrastructure as a service is kind of like what we're moving away from now. That's kind of like heavy virtualization. And then I think the next piece is today you have to have experience in containerization and maybe, cloud-based experience like AWS or Azure, because that's a lot of your endpoints are going to go there. And then from a skills perspective, for, linking all of this together, strong background in scripting, I should say, like I didn't mention Gradle as one of the tools, but, understanding how to script in different languages that Gradle uses, which is, I believe it's like Ruby based, and just having strong shell scripting understanding, because you link a lot of things together from different systems, and most of them are Linux systems. So understanding shell scripting, other things like Ansible. I didn't mention earlier Chef. So Chef, Ansible, those are kind of like automation tools, and Chef is more configuration management. Having strong skills in GitHub, just understanding, the commit structures, pull requests, so you can do code reviews and some of those best practices there. Let me see what else. I think that would get you to a good start. And then some of the testing frameworks. A lot of times you don't necessarily, as a DevOps architect, have to write the test cases. That's generally in the realm of the application developers, but at least having an understanding of how to best run those test cases, because, testing, there's different types of testing, functional, non-functional, and they require certain levels of resources. So as an architect, you want to be able to make the decisions. Where's the best place to run those tests to make sure those tests are accurate and as close as, close as they are as production like. I think that's a really good start.
And this leads me to my next question, because I'm not a technical person, and some of the interviews y'all have to go through for your roles are insane. So I want to ask, from an interview perspective, if someone's going for a DevOps role, what are important topics that they need to brush up on, or what are some potential questions that might be asked?
Yeah, so for an interview, so some of the questions that I may ask is, first thing, I would just kind of want to get a strong understanding of, their background and some of the tooling that I just mentioned, like what their skills are, whether it's from using the utilization of GitHub and the utilization of some of the orchestration tools. I would ask them questions on, what's the best way to potentially automate the delivery of some testing? What can be done in parallel? What needs to be done in sequence when you automate it? And how would you necessarily do that within a pipeline? What pipeline frameworks are you familiar with or have experience with? So for instance, Jenkins has its own, what we call pipeline DSL. So it's essentially its own language for pipelines. If you're using GitHub Actions, it has its own language. So I might ask some questions specific to that, especially if that's the tooling that I'm using currently. I think the other thing is one of the things that you definitely want to be well-versed in is deployment techniques. So I was talking earlier about today with DevOps, you can deploy things without having downtime, or you can deploy things into production to experiment. And I know that sounds a little crazy, but if you're using some of these complex deployment techniques like canary releases, that's something that you can do. I would want to know if they had experience with canary releases and actually understood what those are. Same thing with blue-green releases, so that I can easily back out of, if I deploy something that's not working out, I can easily flip to the previous version. So understanding some of those advanced deployment techniques, I think, is very crucial.
Excellent. Excellent. I think that's going to be helpful for people who are looking for a DevOps role. And one final question just around the whole topic of DevOps, and this is just out of my own curiosity. Do you have like a favorite or most interesting project that you worked on from a DevOps perspective? And if so, what is it?
Oh, yeah, I actually kind of do. I laugh at it every time I even think about it, but I think it was probably about, I don't know, 13 years ago. Somehow I was told to a customer, I should say, that I was a mainframe expert. I've never really touched a mainframe. And so this customer, I will honestly say it was a great experience working at this. This is when I was a consultant. I went to this company and they were a great company to work for from a technology standpoint. What they were trying to do was actually do continuous integration. It wasn't full DevOps, but it was close to it. It's you have continuous integration, you have continuous delivery, and kind of like when you link them together, it's kind of like the foundation of DevOps. They were trying to do continuous integration and continuous delivery from the mainframe, but they wanted to actually code on a distributed system like your laptop and automatically push that to the mainframe. But this system actually also ran on what is known as Unix system services, which is kind of like a distributed system that's connected to the mainframe. And so there were components that was on Unix system services. You had a desktop component where you were actually checking your code out of a source control tool like a GitHub, but like GitHub, you would make edits and then you would push it up to the mainframe and it would automatically compile, and then it would run, and then it would link to things on Unix system services. The fact that I can still even explain it, I knew nothing about that. So that was the only thing. I've always been on the distributed side of things. So, working within the IDE, that part was fine, but actually even trying to deliver code and having to write JCL for the first time, which is job control language on the mainframe, having to learn how to write Rex. I had never even heard of Rex. So it was 16-hour days, honestly, a lot of help from my company. I was like, I would never want to be put in that position again, but it was fun. I honestly say it was fun.
It sounds like it was a really great learning experience. Now that like hindsight is 2020.
Right. Exactly. It was a fun learning experience. I think I got quite a few gray hairs out of it, but it was.
And I'm trying to put the dots together, and you said it's a natural progression, but I need some help. So you went from like DevOps architect to technical product manager. How did you go from like this what I consider an extremely technical role to a more customer facing but still technical role? Like, how does that progression happen?
I think I was kind of lucky, honestly, because even when I was a DevOps architect, I was working for a smaller company where I had to wear a lot of hats. So a lot of times we'll get a contract to deliver a certain service that was, maybe like the one I just talked about to automate, deployments of to build distributively, to code distributively, and then build on the mainframe and connect to distributed systems and deploy that in the testing and production. So a lot of times I'm the only person showing up for that. So I'm working on the statement of work. I'm working with the customer early on. I'm working with the statement of work. And then at the same time, I'm kind of managing the customer, managing to that statement of work while I'm on site, and I'm implementing. Sometimes in some cases, I don't necessarily have to implement. Other times I'm just kind of like being more of a project manager, project management in the pure sense back then. But a lot of times, even when I'm implementing, I had to always interface with the customer. So I was always getting that when I was working for a small company and going from, customer to customer to customer, I was always out in front. So I think I kind of got that natural experience of working with customers and always keeping the customer in mind. Then when I started working in larger enterprises and focusing more purely on DevOps, I was always the lead. And so we weren't necessarily following, agile methodology at first, but I'm still out front in front of the consumer. I'm still looking at the requirements. I'm translating them back into a feature that we deliver. And I'm the lead engineer on that. And so I'm still consumer focused. So I think once we started going into agile, that's where it kind of helped. So when I started doing primarily all agile methodologies, no matter where I was working. I went more from a lead position into a product owner position. And so a technical product owner. And so I'm a SME in the space of DevOps. I'm delivering, DevOps for my company, and that product owner just automatically transitioned further away from the keyboard into product management. But I kind of did have to kind of take a step away from the technology to, on purpose, to get more into that product management role as that last step.
Yeah, I definitely can see that. And you know what, Art, we've been talking for a while. We've talked through some of your different roles, but one thing that I never asked you before, and I don't even know myself, is how did you even get into tech, especially these technical roles?
Yeah, yeah, good question. So I think I was always technical growing up. I blame that on my parents. My parents were not technical at all, but they just kind of knew that the world would be technical. So they just stressed math, science growing up. That was it. Math, science. I remember they bought me my first computer, and I would buy Computer World magazine, and they would have, programs written in BASIC. And I would go, and it's always a typo in them somewhere. So without even having a book, I kind of learned how to program on my own by just kind of typing in those programs and kind of understanding what was going on. Mm-hmm. And so I always took a fancy, I guess, to computing, especially computer programming. But in college, I decided to actually, with the grounding of science and mathematics in college, I decided to go into chemical engineering. That I almost graduated in chemical engineering, actually. But I dropped out of school, kind of was a little wayward for like a year, and then I came back. And there's a class that we call unit operations in chemical engineering. It's 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and it's only offered in the summer. And I had a prerequisite to that class that I had missed. So when I came back, there was like, you're gonna have to sit in school for a year just to finalize 4 classes. I'm like, I'm not doing that. So I went to the computer engineering department. I was like, how long would it take for me to get a degree in computer engineering? And this is really coming from my chemical engineering classes, where anytime we had a lab or something, I was the one always writing the computer programs, and I just learned that on my own. Mm-hmm. So I ended up graduating with a degree in computer engineering. But right before that, before I'm going to graduate, I'm like, hey, I've never had an internship in this. It's going to be kind of hard to get a job. And so a friend of mine had just got a job at a particular company, and she made a call for me and was like, hey, they're going to be here recruiting. You might want to take an internship with them. And that internship has basically been the cement of my career from there. I met people on that internship, and they became some of my best friends to this day. They own that small company that I end up working for later. But when I left that internship, I went to go work for a major corporation. Some people call them Big Blue. Worked there for several years, and then I left there and went and worked for that small company. And that small company happened to also have dealings with the company I work with today. And so I would consult there from time to time, and I kind of cemented my reputation, and they had great opportunities, and I decided to take one there. And so it's just, I guess, you know what, you just never know how your paths are going to go. But I can honestly say every step of the way, I met someone that was very influential into how I ended up in technology and where I ended up working.
You know what, that's a great lesson in like not burning bridges, right? And Absolutely. Also how relationships are a major key in tech, because you can meet someone now and then in 5 or 10 years be working at their company, or, be using that relationship to join a new company. So relationships are so key in the tech industry, because I think it's a lot smaller than people think.
You are right on. Like when you say don't burn any bridges, there was people that I came across in my, in my career that I thought I would never see again. And you're right, it's a very small world. I could be in a company just walking down the hallway and someone say, hey, Art, and I'd turn around as someone that I was consulting for, 10 years ago.
Right.
And that's happened to me multiple times.
And you know what, you've been in IT for over 20 years and counting, and that's a long time. So I have to ask, how do you stay motivated to work in tech? Because some days it's draining. Some days it's a lot, but you're still here.
Yeah. I ask that question to myself sometimes too. It can be draining. I think one part that keeps me motivated is that tech is always changing. And I think one of the things you have to do is be open to change. Technology has always been changing. I mean, that's what it does, but it's changing at a pace that's way faster than it's ever changed. And that part actually makes it exciting to me because it's not as mundane. And that curiosity in me is always, even though I'm not getting low level, but I'm, reading up on, what this new technology can do, why we would want to use it, why you may not want to use it, all those different considerations. I think that's what keeps it fresh, but it also keeps it challenging. That's the part that I want to tear my hair out sometimes because we'll spend a lot of time and money to move to a certain platform just to 3 years, 4 years later, move to another platform. But yeah, so I think it's really the change, the pace of change and just being open to change. And that's what keeps it exciting for me more than anything.
Speaking of change, I have to know, what are some of the new tech topics or, new technology that's coming out that you think is going to be like the face of the future?
Yeah, so that the container platforms I was talking about I guess containerization is not necessarily new, but the adoption of it is kind of new. And it's only really becoming widely adopted in the last few years. I think containerization is basically changing the way we build programs, run programs, and how fast we can deploy them. And that would play directly into DevOps. So that's one of them. Cloud computing, I mean, we've been talking about AWS for a long time now, but there's AWS, there's Google out there, Azure, and some other players. But the products that they're delivering in that realm also, from a containerization standpoint, or even serverless computing, where you can run programs without an actual server. You just get the compute that you need. There's no, hey, I have an IP address here, is running specifically here. You don't care about that. I just need to run this. And so I think serverless computing is what it's already out there, but it's not widely adopted yet. Mm-hmm. But I think there are some, trailblazers that are doing a really good job at it. So I think serverless computing is what you're really going to see next. And that really changes the paradigm of things because you just don't care where things are running and what they're running on. You just care that you get the expected feedback back. And that's it.
And who are some of those trailblazers that you've been checking out so my listeners can look that up as well?
Okay, yeah. Some of the top companies that I would say like Netflix, LinkedIn, those are some of the top companies when it comes to, being able to deliver compute, deliver their applications and make changes to their applications pretty much on the fly. So Netflix is amazing to me, honestly. What you see on Netflix may be completely different than what I see. They can actually put in, different features and just test them among a small subset of people and just get feedback to determine whether they want to roll it out to others. So I think those are two that come top of mind. So those are some of the two that I would mention right off the top.
I always appreciate your viewpoint on like new tech topics because I don't know if you remember, but when we worked together, you were the one that put me on to like blockchain and all that stuff. And look at how far it's come in the future. Now we got NFTs and it's using the blockchain. So
my goodness,
asking you that question.
Oh my goodness, you brought me back a little bit, Deena. And you know what? You just asked me about some of the. I don't know how I left blockchain out. I'm still trying to figure out where blockchain is going to go, but NFTs I was like, what is NFTs? These non-fungible tokens and stuff. Like that's another space I can't keep up in. So I'm always trying to read up and learn about it. But yeah, where the digital currencies and blockchain is going, just general ledger technology in general, where it's going. That's another one. I don't know how I failed to bring it up.
No worries. Well, there's so many topics and so little time to bring up everything. So I definitely understand. All right, two final questions for you. Mm-hmm. First is a question about your future. So your career progression, you've done DevOps architect, you're now doing technical product manager. Where do you see yourself going next after like technical product manager?
Yeah, I was asking myself that this morning, actually. I'm still working on that, I think, a little bit. I think technical product manager, I want to kind of fill it out a little bit more. I am considering potentially going to a more pure product management role where I do get more into the business side of things and making decisions on things like market segmentation. That's, the more I study product management, that is becoming, I'm more interested in it. And that's the non-technical side of things. So that's one thing. And then I think the other one is just, upper management within an enterprise, maybe, like director, VP or something like that. I know those are two different paths, but I'm trying to decide which way I would want to go. So those, I think either one would be a natural progression for me. If I went the more pure product management role, it would probably mean transitioning to a more, into the more customer facing instead of consumer facing. And when I say consumer versus customer, like my platform is the consumers of it are application developers mainly and data scientists within my company. But the pure product management role would be interfacing directly with customers that use like our mobile apps or, our websites and things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's always good to have career options. So I'm not mad at you for having two different directions that you might want to take.
All right.
And final question for today. So for people listening to this podcast are either already in the industry or looking to get into tech, and they aspire to be in a awesome position such as yourself. So what do you recommend for my listeners in regards to getting into the industry and being successful?
Yeah, so I would say getting into the industry, just be curious. I think I brought up being curious quite a bit in this conversation, but I think people that are good with technology, they really, like anything else, they really enjoy it. And so I think there's a lot of technology out there. So find out what technology you enjoy. So for me, it's in the compute space, DevOps. Others, it could be, like you mentioned, blockchain earlier. Just find out where it is that you want to play. And there's so many opportunities to do that. And then I think look at, to get in at first, you can either, college degree, but it's not necessarily a college degree. I mean, some of the best people I've hired that I've met and hired have come right out of high school. And they were more advanced than some people that had college degrees. I think just get college degrees or the certification to actually get into a company. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to have a college degree. I think that's the first part. And then once you actually get that entry level position, or you get into a space that you want to be in, be curious about everything you come across. So even if it's not necessarily in your domain. So for instance, you may be an application developer, but you're interfacing, you issues that are interfacing with the network. You have issues that come up that interface with your caching systems or your databases. And when you're working with the other SMEs of those different domains, learn as much as you possibly can learn. Because I'm seeing a paradigm shift in the talent today. The talent today is really becoming very, they have a lot of breadth in skills, and they have a lot of depth in at least 2 or 3 or maybe 4 major areas, but they understand at a medium level almost every part of the computing paradigm across the board. And that allows you to take data points and make critical decisions when you're architecting or making engineering decisions at a different level than someone else that's just really kind of looking at technology and understanding technology at a deep level in their own domain.
Excellent. I think that is really great advice. And Art, you have shed a lot of technical light, if not for everyone else, then for me during this conversation today. Any additional or last parting words for anyone listening to the episode?
I'm just excited. Anyone listening, if you're interested in technology, I just say, just go for it. It's one of those things where you're learning all the time. And if you like to learn all the time, it's the place to be. And like I said, there's so many different areas you can be in technology in, because pretty much everything we do is through some digital format. So just find your place. And And if you do something you don't like, you can go do something else that you can find your place somewhere else in technology also. So wherever you start doesn't necessarily mean that's where you have to end up. You have a lot of choices.
Yes, I like that. You are not a tree. You can always move. So always remember that.
Yeah.
Art, thank you for your time today. Truly appreciate it. And thank you for giving some knowledge to my listeners.
I can make my world come true. All my dreams will see me through. And if that will get me down, my dreams will turn things all around. With a smile upon my face, I can see a better place. Doesn't matter what blow. I can